G'day, my name is David Thomas Kay and I'm here to talk about fiction and fantasy. I write historical fiction and fantasy and I'm the author of a series called Circles of Time. The first storytellers were the cave dwellers, recounting their tribal wars and their experiences of hunting and gathering. As time moved on, they began to exaggerate their stories to entertain their listeners, and this has to be the first evidence of fiction based on fact. The stories progressed into the fantasy of dreams and the creation of gods. You could say this was fiction based on fantasy. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories of how the world began. The stories of the rain serpent and the three sisters. Zeus of Greek mythology and Jupiter of ancient Rome, and Thor of Norse mythology. Zeus, Jupiter and Thor, all three of them gods of the sky and of thunder and lightning. Three different civilizations from following eras with the same beliefs, mythology passed down for centuries, and an endless source of material for today's writers and film producers. Vikings hired skalds from their own ranks to exaggerate and glorify their victorious battles. These Scandinavian poets created legends that were based on fact but verged on fantasy. Then we have the modern day fantasies of science fiction, the Day of the Triffids and Star Wars, Galactica and Dune, and the most fascinating of all stories for young and old, the endless number of children's fantasy books. They stir the imagination of a child, and often grown-ups, as they enjoy the suspension of belief, as the space between fantasy and reality. The adaptation of television and cinema extends our fantasy, as we are persuaded to enter a new world of entertaining escapism. The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, The Chronicles of Narnia, Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, Peter Pan, Harry Potter, and The Never-Ending Story. These are only a small sample of the numerous children's classics enjoyed by all ages and recognised as expanding the development of a young mind. There are talking animals. Yes, there are talking animals. It's true, I've seen them. Mythical creatures, dwarves and centaurs, child protagonists, evil witches, adventures galore, and always the clash between good and evil. And it's not surprising how many of these protagonists fly like birds. Peter Pan, Harry Potter. Fantasy is escapism, and readers are willing to be transported to another world, to be entertained and to escape reality for a short time. But the rules of writing don't change because of the genre or the location. There are goodies and baddies everywhere, and a story must have a hero and a villain. I'll pause here for a look at some relevant slides. Hello again. They say that everyone has a story to tell, but once told, what then? Stories are all around us, if we're observant. Stories from the past have already been acted out, but that same story can be changed with the creation of new characters. Stories are about people, and their personalities are the catalyst that brings your life story together. How well developed characters will determine your success. Place them in a stressful situation and your characters will develop. Friction between a villain and a hero leads to conflict and suspense, which in turn leads to emotion and stress and a test of the character. From this conflict, a new personality can emerge, weak or strong, and be accepted by the reader. A strong, well-developed personality can dictate the progress of a story and change the direction of the plot. The story takes on a new perspective and the reader will follow, unaware. Most authors welcome these situations and they will follow the emerging characters with increasing interest. How many times have you heard an author relating how his main protagonist has taken over and is leading him into an uncharted territory? It's exciting for the writer and rejuvenating for the story. In the world of today's fiction writing, we embellish with a game that is called poetic license. This is necessary to the art of storytelling. It's a game played by the reader and the writer, and is written as suspension of belief, or how far to go with fantasy without losing your credibility with the reader. When you are writing obsessively and you forget to eat, it's a sure bet to say that you've found your elusive story. I found my story in the Chronicles of the Kings of Norway, written by Snorri Sturluson, the Icelandic poet. A history of Norway compiled from the works of the Scandinavian poets, the King's Skalds. I was looking for something other than the usual war game. And it was not the elderly Norwegian King Harald, the first king of all Norway, but the young English King Athelstan, the intriguing first king of all England, who came to my interest. He was renowned for his collection of relics, including the holy lance of Longinus that speared the side of Christ. He was generous when seeking an advantage to the throne, and with his half-brother Prince Edwin, he was instrumental in establishing the Masonic constitution and reviving the legendary 15 articles and 15 points. The order later became associated with the Holy Crusade of the military order of the fighting monks, the Knights Templar. He gifted a magnificent sword to Harold Fairfax, and a year later the favour was returned with the gift of a magnificent ship which straddled with Harold's bastard child named Hagon. Surprisingly, the child was accepted by King Athelstan. He was childless, and Haakon was baptised and brought up a Christian. The sword was considered to be unlucky and passed down to the brave warrior who delivered Harold's bastard child. 3 years after Harold's death, at the age of 80, the 14-year-old Haakon was given 3 ships and sailed to Norway with an army and successfully claimed the throne from Eric. He ruled for many years as Haakon the Good, a Christian trying valiantly, but without success, to fulfill his stepfather King Athelstan's wish of converting the Norwegian heathens to Christianity. This story became the foundation of my historical fantasy, the Sword of St. Isidore's. The origin of the sword was unknown, so I gave it a history, and I claimed it was forged from Toledo steel for a prince of Spain, only to be pillaged in a North Viking raid. The sword with the precious jewel sheath became the protagonist of my evolving story. According to George Poty, a French 19th century writer, in regards to stories and a plot, there are only 36 dramatic situations that complete the total range of stories that writers can write about. These situations can be varied in an infinite number of ways and have been used by imaginative storytellers since the beginning of time. A well-used exercise on short story writing is to write 1,000 words on any three combinations of George Pelly's situation, remembering that in academia there is no such thing as an original story. I've included the site for your viewing. Thank you.